Dobro večer. Ne znam da li ste spremni, ali sada ćemo vam otkriti tajnu. I to bez izvinjenja. Iako imamo ovdje naravno knjigu sa tim naslovom, autorice vi, koja je bivša Ensler. A razgovarat će sa njom izuzetna Rada Borić, a prije toga slijedi još jedno malo, možda i veliko iznenađenje. Pozdravit će je Jasmila Žbanić.
Dobro večer. So, welcome Eve, welcome Rada. Thank you Book and Bookstan for organizing this wonderful event, for publishing Eve's really fantastic book. I just want to say how happy I am that you are here, that this event is taking place, because you are such special women. I met you in '98. Yesterday I was asking Rada, how did we met in '98? And she said, but remember you were a student at the academy, we came for audition, and for some reason there was no actors coming for the audition of Necessary Targets. I came to them because I was really interested to be part of it. And I said, it's not really our custom to audition. Our actors are not used to audition. So we somehow bonded. I was assistant to their wonderful project. And we called actors. And I want to say hello to Vesna Mašić, who is with us. She was in Vesna. She was wonderful in Necessary Targets. Yes, Vesna, the queen. And since then, our friendship started. Eve was always connected. We was always connected. Sorry, with this region. Always aware what's happening here, pushing the right ideas, pushing us women to do the best. Supporting us in every way, and you are such an inspiration for all of us. Thank you so much. I'm so happy. Thank you, Rada.
Dobro večer. I'm going to pretend to be from Sarajevo because I think I'm also from Bosnia and Herzegovina, and nobody can put the frontiers and boundaries between me and wonderful people that live here. And this is one of the reasons also that, as Jasmila mentioned, Eve has been here almost 30 years ago. Even earlier, she came during the war to Zagreb, to Center for Women War Victims, when we supported women from Bosnia and Herzegovina who were fleeing from the war. And when we came, for the first time, we came to Medica Zenica, and it's so wonderful to see the same women that we were then with, as Nuna sitting here, and Jadranka, and many others that couldn't come. We went. It would be, I think that we arrived even the same date, 7th of July 1996, just 4 days before the first anniversary of Srebrenica genocide. And we went with Nuna and with women from Srebrenica to Tuzla, where still that year women expected, just a year after, that their husbands or brothers or sons would appear, that they would come from these mines that supposedly they have been, or that somebody would bring them back. They put little rouge. They have been crying the days before we started. And Eve was in the bus giving this miracle American pill, Advil, because we all had headaches. This is how we started supporting women and to show more empathy. And look where we are 20 years later, not only as Eve would say that there is no justice, nobody even said a word, I'm sorry, or make the apology. But that I wouldn't have an introduction to my wonderful friend that I think we said we are married, we are longer together than many couples we know. So And she has been back to Sarajevo many times to Pičvaj's festival of Cure, and we visited Crvena, and we know about all the movements. I'm so happy I heard today that finally I think the small plants would be forbidden in Bosnia, that women from Kruščica succeeded. And I think this is about us and our resistance. And I think that the title is really perfect of Bookstan. And I want to, Bookstan sounds good too. Bookstan, I think it's wonderful. The title also, what for us is siege, and what for somebody who writes. And Eve said in a book in one place, in a voice of her father, that literature is passport to freedom, and I think art is passport to freedom. And thank you all for coming. But I let Eve at the beginning to tell a little bit about her experience from Bosnia, and how eventually you said, well, almost everything started on the Balkans about her writing. Not only necessary targets that we mentioned, a story, a piece about refugees, but also Vagina monologues. The first monologue started here. So Eve, welcome to Sarajevo, and the floor is yours.
Thank you. Hi, everyone. Oh, you have to turn this on. Do I just, no, I got this. Hi, dobro večer. I have to say I'm so moved to be here to see Jasmila and Vesna and Nuna and Tanya. I could just go on the list. I'm very emotional, you know. I think I'm having so many memories of the war, and so many memories of really difficult times here, and how women, just how extraordinary women were during that time, how women rose up across ethnic groups, across all kinds of divides, and really stood for each other and fought for each other. And sorry, I didn't realize I was going to be so emotional.
It's okay to be emotional.
But I think why I'm feeling so emotional is like to see Jasmila, who was really in her 20s then, now one of the great filmmakers in the world, you know, bravo. I mean, really, and just to see her grown up and to see her, who she's become, is just so moving to me. And Vesna, who was so brave when we did Necessary Targets at the National Theatre, she actually learned how to speak the play in English through phonetics, and performed with Glenn Close and Marissa Tomei, and was so brilliant and so amazing, and then did so many other pieces, you know. It's just so moving to me to see her now, and to see everybody, and Nuna and Tanya and Adrenka, all the work everybody has done over these years for women to change consciousness and to lift people and to fight for freedom of. And I have to say that Bosnia lives in the center of my heart. It always has, you know. There was something about being here during the war and seeing the suffering, but also seeing the vitality of people and the kindness of people in the midst of all that has just lived inside me, and it will live inside me forever. So thank you for inviting me back. I'm so moved to be here. And I just want to say, too, that I've been thinking a lot about apology and reconciliation, and what does it mean, and what happens when people don't get apologies? What happens when people don't acknowledge what has happened? And I think of the end of Jasmila's brilliant new film, when you see the whole town of all the people who were involved in Srebrenica sitting next to each other, and some of them are perpetrators and some of them are victims, and they're all mixed up together. But nobody's gotten any accountability or justice or apology. And it worries me, because I see what's happened in America, where our country is founded on lies, is founded on taking land away from other people, the Native American people, the indigenous people, founded on 400 years of slavery that is really just now beginning to be acknowledged. And what's happening is our country is imploding. It's completely falling apart because there has been no reckoning. There has been no accountability. And I was really saddened to hear when we were talking the other night that so many of the divides between Serbs and Croats and Muslims still remain. And, you know, I think we all have to struggle to figure out how to change that, because things will repeat themselves again if we don't come to accountability, if we don't make apologies, if we don't come to justice, you know. So I'm really happy to be here. And I think also that I just want to thank my friend Rada, because Rada has been my sister for so long. And you know, we have been in this movement of V-Day and 1 Billion Rising, and so many women here have been part of that movement. But she really brought this movement to the Balkans and has spread it. And she's a member of parliament now. I mean, things have really changed, you know? Yeah. So.
I think, you know, it's difficult. You have two friends, and now we started praising each other's, which is not very good, but I think it's good really to acknowledge. And when Eve said she was too emotional, of course I became emotional, and I think it's finally to recognize that to be emotional, nothing's wrong with this. And that we are, as Eve wrote one wonderful piece too, called I'm an Emotional Creature. Because to young women, usually they would say, you are too emotional, don't be emotional. No, I think if men would show more emotions, maybe we would be on a better place. Also, so thank you for being emotional and teaching us to being emotional. But okay, maybe it's a time, since we have a wonderful book, you can get a book. Now I'm a little bit, you know, doing advertisement. You can get a book after that in a bookstore with small discounts, and of course Eve can sign it, put your own name, and you can have it. And we were very happy that Eve signed a book to a granddaughter of Mark Dizdar. And I think this is so wonderful. There is a little feminist girl who definitely wanted to have a book. And we met Jasmila. When we met Jasmila, she was like, I think, third-year student. And yesterday we met her daughter, brilliant Zoe, who is 21, who was so smart. And I thought, yes, in our Slavic language is budućnost, future. It's by gender, female. So I think that definitely future is female. And I think it has to be, because sorry guys, all guys here are definitely on our side, but the guys messed it. So I think we are not willing anymore to patch up. We are going to create a better future for all of us with all the changes that we have, political, climate crisis. So, but we'll go back to the book. We are not going to tell you all the secrets, as you know, it's not good, but I'll start with really the sentence, introductory words that Eve said, and she just said, I'm done waiting. So for so long time, we all wait for something, and Eve is waiting for so long to get apology from her father. Why did you decide it was time to stop waiting?
Well, I'll tell you this much. I think I grew up in a family that was very, very violent. My father sexually abused me when I was 5 till I was 10, and then he beat me and almost murdered me several times. And I think I grew up and I dreamed that one day my father would wake up and he'd see the error of his ways, and he would say, oh my God, what have I done? I'm so sorry. I didn't mean it. How could I have done that? Bah, 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 bah. That never happened. My father actually died, and we weren't even speaking because his verbal violence and his mental violence continued until he died. And after his death, even 31 years later, a weird thing would happen. I would find myself going to the mailbox, waiting for his letter. I don't even know, from the other realm, to say he was sorry, you know? Like, when is the apology coming? And I think one of the things we all know when we've been abused, when we've been exploited, when we've been hurt, is like, no matter what happens, it's still lodged in us until someone actually gives us a true, deep, sincere apology. And then the Me Too movement was happening in the States, and all these men were getting called out. But I kept waiting for a man to come out publicly and make a real apology, to really take responsibility for what he had done. And there weren't any. There weren't any. There weren't any. All men were doing were feeling sorry for themselves for being caught, right? And I started to think, have I ever heard a man publicly apologize for sexual abuse? And I started to read literature, and I could not find an apology. So I started to think, well, we've done everything else. I might as well write my father's apology to myself and write the words that I wanted to hear, write what I wanted him to say, write all the things I needed to hear in order to be liberated and free. And it was a very, very excruciating process, I have to say, because, to be honest with you, I never wanted to let my father off the hook. I never wanted to understand my father's pain. I didn't want to know why my father did what he did, because I was always so raging at my father, and I didn't care about the reasons he did it. But all of that kept me weirdly connected to my father. Like I was still his victim. I was always, no matter what happened in my life, if I was successful, I was like, see, you were wrong, I'm not stupid. Everything was proving to my father over and over again that he was wrong about me. So I was in this very, very sick relationship with him. And I didn't want to be in that relationship anymore. I wanted to be free of my father. So when I began this piece, I really I live in the woods now in upstate New York. I moved there about 7 years ago. And I just really asked my father if he would just come from the other realm and be with me. Just be with me through this experience. And it's very strange about the dead. They're all around us. They're all around us. They just need to be summoned. They need to be called. And what I discovered about my father is that my father was really stuck in this realm that he couldn't get out of because he hadn't processed what he had done to me. He was churning in the badness and all the wicked things he had done to me, and he was just stuck. So we began this dialogue where I said to him, would you please write your apology and write it through me, and I'll just write it down as you're speaking to me. And he would come to me. Sometimes he'd wake me up at 4 o'clock in the morning, and I'd go to my office and he'd say, I'm going to tell you a story, and I'd write the story down. And I don't really know who wrote this book in some ways. I feel like I conjured him. He was with me. He was present with me. And one of the amazing things that happened is I began to know my father in a way that I'd been afraid to know my father. I began to see how my father had suffered. I began to see how patriarchy, what it had done to my father, how it had robbed him of his ability to be relaxed, to be free, to be himself, that there was so much pressure put on him to be the golden boy and the special one, and how he just kept pushing down his feelings, and his brother was abusive, and he denied it, and he pushed it down, and he became charming, and he became fabulous, and he became this, but he was always, always repressing his rage and repressing this darker shadow side of him. And as I wrote, I'll tell you something, it taught me that the pathway to freedom is not to actually say to our perpetrators, you're dead, I don't want to ever know you, I want to kill you off. The pathway to freedom is understanding, not justification. My father was wrong, what he did was wrong, that will never change. But to understand why my father did what he did was my freedom. Because for so long, and I think this is true for many women who've been raped, I think this is true for many women and people in war who get hurt, you always blame yourself. You think there's something wrong with me, there's something I could have done better, what did I do to bring this on myself? Women are always being told you were wearing the wrong thing, or you were in the wrong place, or you did something wrong, or you were seductive, or you did something wrong. And writing this book, I realized it had nothing to do with me. It was about my father. This was my father. I was a child. My father did that to me as a child. I didn't bring that on. I was 5 years old. I was barely conscious as a human being. And I think I really began to learn two things. One, that the non-apology is really keeping patriarchy in its place. Men are taught from the time they're born that to apologize is a sign of weakness. It means you're not a man. It means you make yourself vulnerable. It means people can come and get you. I'm just reading this book right now on the Sackler, empire who put oxycodone into the world of America. And people were dying in droves. They never apologized. The lawyers would say, never apologize. Never make yourself vulnerable. Hundreds, People are dying, but you never apologize. So I think men have been taught, and if you think about this culture, if you think about every culture in the world, because every culture in the world is patriarchal, you think how men do not apologize, who never own their behavior, never own what they've never investigate what they've done. And it keeps everything and all the violence and all the pain recycling and recycling and recycling. And so to begin to apologize would actually be the beginning of not only the person who's been victimized, but the perpetrator's liberation. It liberates all of us. It frees all of us from our past. And the second thing I realized is that apologies are not easy things to do. It's not like, I'm sorry if I hurt you, or I'm sorry you feel bad. I'm sorry. Apologies are deep, reflective, humble processes that require great reflection, great honesty, time, and incredible amounts of attention. And I think they require humility. I think they require opening yourself to another human being. I think they are about equality. You know, once you apologize to somebody, you're equal with them. You're not above them. And I think, and I'll just say this last thing, I was invited to speak at the Riverside Church in New York. And I got up and I actually began by reading the apology that the Australian government made to the Aboriginals as an example of what an apology looked like. And then afterwards, the ministers and the priests were coming up and saying, you were in church and we don't know why you didn't read something from the Bible. And I said, well, there's actually nothing in the Bible about apology. There's nothing. I combed the Bible. Old Testament, New Testament, there is nothing in the Bible. And they were like, what do you mean? I said, oh, there's something about forgiveness. There's something about you will forgive, but how do you forgive if there's no accountability? That's a fake forgiveness, right? If someone doesn't own what they've done, what are you forgiving them for, right? And they were shocked and they said, you're right, there's nothing in the... I said, of course, it was written by men, right? There would never be a time that they would write into it that you must learn how to apologize. So I think, and I'll maybe talk about it a little later, that I think there is a real 4-step process in learning how to apologize, and I think it's something we all can learn, but I also think it's a pathway for men to really connect with women in a much deeper way and to really allow them to own what they've done. You know, my friend Tony Porter says, we've called men out, now we need to call them in, you know, so that they can be with us on this journey, so that they can own their behavior and be free of their behavior and change their behavior, because that's what apologies lead to.
As you started, maybe that you continue, as I think it's still ringing, the kind of one of the key words around apology, why we do not apologize, that we do not want to show our weakness, and how this is wrong, and what steps we could do. As you said, we could all learn that to expose, to be vulnerable, nothing's wrong with this. So how we undo all this, what we think that to be vulnerable is bad, to be emotional, I'm going back, and what does it mean to be weak? Are those killers, are those rapists, are they strong, or eventually what's weakness?
Well, for me, and I can only say this, I think vulnerability is the greatest strength. When you are able to be vulnerable, it's an indication of your power. Right? Because it means that you are open and you can stand in openness. And I just will say that I think there are 4 steps to an apology. One is really examining who you are. Like, I first asked my father, like, what kind of man? Who made you? What went into making you as a human being? What were you taught about yourself as a man? What were you taught about yourself as a human being? What went into me being capable of doing something like that to you? What constructed me, right? And I think you can look at any situation like that. You can look at white supremacy and go, how did I become a white supremacist? How did I become a Chetnik? How did I become somebody who was willing to destroy other people and rape women in war? What went into me that at a certain point I was able to switch and I was able to do that? Like, what was I taught? And to really examine that. Then the second piece is, what did I do? What are the details of what I did to another person? And The only real apology is based on specifics. Here is what I did to you. I came into your room at night. I pulled back the sheets. I pulled off your panties. I did this to you. Because for a victim, unless you say to them exactly what you've done to them, they don't get free. It's vague, you won't get free. But if it's specific, if it's detailed, if it's real, then you actually, as you're speaking to your victim, you are freeing her step by step by step of everything you did to her because you are acknowledging it and owning it. So often, victims are gaslit, right? They're told, like, you made me do it, or you're responsible for this, or you're making this up, or whatever, whatever, whatever. And we carry that as well as the abuse. But when someone comes and says to us, I did this to you, and I did this to you, and I did this to you, and that is real, and what you remember is real, what you feel is real, all of a sudden you feel like, I'm not insane, I'm not crazy. What happened really did happen. I didn't imagine this, right? And you did have an ulterior motive, and you did have bad intentions towards me. And okay, now that you're saying it, I can breathe. And then the third step is looking at the long-term consequences. What did my actions do to your life? So for my father, his raping me as a child and his beating me completely, in many ways, disrupted and destroyed my life for many years. It made me incapable of intimacy. It made me bizarre about sex. It made me not trust anyone. It made me not be able to focus or think because I was always so nervous and so traumatized. It made me weird in my body. It made me leave my body and separate my body. So like a lot of things happened to me that shouldn't have happened to me because I wasn't living inside my own body. It made me stupid. There were years and years in my life where I just felt dumb because I was so filled with trauma. And my father had to take responsibility for all those things in the book. He had to look at what were the long-term impacts of his behavior on me and acknowledge those long-term behaviors. I know so many women in the Balkans, in Bosnia, who I know are in this room today. I know women who have been raped and who have been violated and are still just beginning to understand how to unweave that story, how to climb out of that bell jar that is just present on our heads. It takes years and years to unravel it. But if your perpetrator were to come and say to you, I acknowledge what I did to you, I feel terrible what I did to you, it would make that process happen so much quicker. You wouldn't have to do that process on your own. And the last step, of course, is saying you're sorry. And all of those steps showing that you are now a different person who wouldn't be capable of doing that to anybody else. So that an apology is real and can be received by the person you have harmed. And writing my father's apology was so profound for me because I began to see what I needed to hear, what I needed to, in order to free my soul from what he had done to me. And also the specifics of what he had done to me, which I was also denying, also pushing away because it was too painful. And so it always had me controlled because I wasn't acknowledging it, right?
I think maybe it's a time I have an English, the apology in English. So would you just pick up that they could just read a little bit, that they hear how the sentence sound? I managed to read translation in Bosnian, and I really loved it. And also, sometimes we forget to acknowledge the translators because they have to pass into our language all the feelings what are in the book. And I think also I have to praise a woman who did a cover of Izvinjenje, and Lala is sitting in the first row, because in Bosnian, and I explained to Eve, when you have Izvinjenje, how the design is done, you have nje, and you have like from her twice. And eventually, when you look into the style, I'm not anymore the literary critic. There are many in this space this evening. But then definitely you could hear two voices. There is a voice of a father, but there is a kind of a neutral voice from time to time. And this would be, although they are both Eve's voices, as she said, she never got this apology and she had to write it, But I think she really captured the voice of her father, how in the way he would write, how he would write as a child, that he felt just being object, never properly loved. And it's not like Eve said he would like to release himself from the deeds he did. But I think it's very good just to feel how in English it sounds, and when you would read it in Bosnian, then you could feel how it has a very good rhythm in our language, that you read it rhythmically as one is breathing. So if just pick up, anyways, they heard your voice, but maybe to hear the voice of your father.
I'm trying to think what I'm going to read. All right.
I didn't prepare this with her. Just like.
Okay, I know what I'm going to read. Okay. What kind of bastard have I been? What kind of destruction have I wrought? I have lied and lied to myself and you. I cursed your future of love. At 5, I took your body. You didn't give it to me. I contaminated your sweetness. I ripped the protective golden gates from your garden. I betrayed your trust. I rearranged your sexual chemistry in the basis of your desire. Wrongness and excitement were forever fused together. I made my stain. I left my stinking mark. I infected you. By invading and overwhelming your body, I killed your yearning so early. You did not and could not give me permission. There was no consent. You did not seduce me with your crinoline petticoats. You were simply being an adorable child. I overstimulated your 5-year-old body and planted the seeds of intensity and thrill. You would push yourself too far, take heroin, jump off bridges, drive 100 miles an hour. I robbed you of the ordinary. I destroyed your notion of family. I forced you to betray your mother. You lived in perpetual self-hatred and guilt. I created hierarchy, distrust, and violent competition between you and your siblings. None of you would ever recover from this. I robbed you of agency over your body. You didn't make any decisions. You didn't say yes. This was my projection in order to satisfy my needs. You were 5 years old. I was 52. You had no sovereignty. I exploited and abused you. I took your body. It was no longer yours. I rendered you passive. You compulsively gave it to whoever wanted it because I taught you you should. I forced you out of your body, and because you were dislocated and numb, you were unable to protect yourself. I compromised your safety and ability to defend yourself. I made it that rape became what turned you on. I eviscerated your necessary boundaries so you never knew what was yours and when to say no and how to say stop. I tore the delicate walls of your vagina and made it vulnerable to disease and infection. Your body didn't and couldn't say yes. This was a convenient lie I told myself. You didn't know it was sex. I took what I needed by convincing myself you needed it too. I exploited your adoration. I loved you into secrecy, to lie to your mother, to develop a dual life. This split you in two. I made you feel like a whore. I made you feel you were never worthy of legitimate love. I made intimacy claustrophobic. I left my poison in you. I destroyed your memory by making you want to forget everything. This impacted your intelligence and ability to contain facts and take tests. I stole your innocence. I dimmed your life force and made you feel your sexuality was the curse of bad things. I used your being and body to serve myself. I did this, all of this. Oh, saxophone, take me out. Take me out.
As you could see, she just picked up. Of course, you knew where, but we didn't agree what you would read. I think you could see that one also, as a writer, has to have a courage to put all this, one would say, horrors on a page. What's done to somebody when you misuse trust? And when you misuse trust of a child, it's similar. If we close our eyes and just listen what happens, it could be to any other woman in any other situation. And all this taken away more or less from somebody. So of course during the war, one is not misusing somebody's trust, but one is really raping somebody's future in a sense that one needs years and years of therapy. When you think what's done to Eve and look where she is standing and how Eve is sharing with us, we know that this has to be shared to encourage other women to see that they can have apology to themselves and the way they would know to do it. Eve, you just before Sarajevo, you were in Kenya and before that in Congo. And tell a little bit, sometimes we feel that only horrible things happens to us, and this neoliberal capitalism brought only me, us and us in everything, but also in trauma. But trauma and what's going on to women, I think it's good to see in a perspective that this patriarchy is doing to many women all over the world, and also some of the men or transgender people.
Well, I just say that I was just in Bukavu in Congo, where we have a beautiful, beautiful place called the City of Joy. And it's truly one of the most holy places I've ever been in the world. I mean, there is such joy and there is such transformation. There are, every 6 months, 90 young girls between 14 and 25 who have been massively sexually abused in the ongoing economic war in the Congo, which is a war waged by the West for minerals and stealing coltan and gold and copper from the mines that go into our cell phones. And what's really amazing about City of Joy is women come for 6 months, and they have an amazing team of social workers and staff who love them, who care for them, who work with them so that they transform their pain into power. And when they come, they are usually starving. They can't even look at you in the eye. They are usually they haven't had any place that they've lived. They've been in exile because they were raped in their communities. And when they leave, they are the most powerful, beautiful, amazing women you have ever seen, who then become leaders in their communities. But one of the things that really hit me is I did a workshop when I was there for our staff, because they're using this exercise with the girls in their therapy, where they write letters to their perpetrators, to themselves. And what was really amazing was to see how many of our staff needed apologies. And it really hit me that there's nobody sitting here in this audience, correct me if I'm wrong, who isn't waiting for an apology from someone. If there is, will you raise your hand? I think we're all always, there's someone or many people who have not apologized to us. And what I was saying to the staff is that non-apology lives in the center of us. It becomes bitterness, it becomes anger, it becomes violence, it becomes a refusal to trust. It becomes so many things that push people away. But when you begin to apologize, when people begin to apologize to you, then you get free, and then there's fluidity and energy can flow, and there can be a gorgeous relationship between you and other people. And I think part of what I feel now is whenever I'm wrong, I honestly cannot wait to apologize. I can't wait, because I know it's done then. I'm not going to walk away and hold on to it for the next 10 years or the next 10 months or the next 10 minutes. It's finished. And yes, I'm vulnerable. And I want to be vulnerable. I want to be vulnerable. I want to live as a vulnerable person in the world. And I see these young women at City of Joy who have nothing. When I tell you nothing, I mean they have no money, they have no homes, they come there and they are bankrupt of everything except their souls, right? And over a period of 6 months, I see what happens to them. I see how they begin to dance and how they begin to sing and how they do theater and how they learn and how their brains begin to function and how they start to dress and care about themselves and look fabulous. And I realize it isn't that hard to change each other. It just requires love. You know, I'm getting older, and I remember when I was younger and I would look at wise older people and they would say things like, everything's about love, and I would be, yeah, okay, yeah. I'm that person now. I'm that person now. I think that love is the most powerful thing that we have. And what does love mean? It means that you see the person in front of you. It means that you respect them. It means that you offer care. It means that you don't demonize them or otherize them or make them somebody else. I was just so sad to hear that Muslims and Croats and Serbs are all entering schools from different entrances. And I was thinking, what do we learn from the war? What did we learn from the war? What do we learn from things? And if we don't apologize, if we don't render ourselves vulnerable for the misdeeds that we've done. You know, I was thinking, Yasmila, at the end of your film, what if all those people had an apology session where they could sit down and say, this is what I did to your father. This is what I did to your brother. And I feel terrible for that. And I want to make amends to you. And I want you to... The whole world would change. That whole community would change. And it's instead we walk around like this and ooh and that and fearful and whatever. And I guess what City of Joy is teaching me every day is that if we create communities of care, if we create communities that are based on our desire to see our brothers and sisters improve and have better lives and grow and be the best of themselves, because that's what we want for every girl at City of Joy. We want her to be the best. And those girls now are going on in their communities. Some have become women who tour the world speaking about sexual violence. Some have started collectives of farms where they have brought all these other girls who have graduated into their collectives, and now they're owning land and farming for their communities. Some are being doctors. Some are developing oils. We're just seeing like a complete shift because they have been loved, because they have been cared for. They are now spreading that to other communities. And it doesn't require that much. It just requires shifting our willingness to be loving people to each other, you know.
I think somebody will tell me how little or how much time still we have, but I'm sure that we are not going to talk more about the book. There is such a rare opportunity. We have somebody who has also been activist for years, and we all have facing the fact what happened around women's rights in the States, and maybe from first hand, Eve could tell us a little bit more. And we all know that this is what happened in the country that always sells democracy all over the world. So we already are mirroring this, and it's spilled over to Europe. We know the situation in Europe for many of the countries, not to mention only Poland or Hungary or Malta that had it before. The threats that we have around women's rights and rights of LGBTIQ communities are really growing. Could you tell a little bit about your fears? We talked, of course, about fears here. I'm not sure would anyone make apology to women of stealing of their human rights.
Well, I always think of Carl Jung saying that in order to survive the century, you have to live with two opposite thoughts at the exact same time, right? And I feel like it couldn't be more true than where we are now, because in some ways, in the last 50 years, we have seen women's advancement in ways we have never dreamed. You know, I mean, look, Parliament, movies. Like, let's just go through all the things women are doing now and all the rights we have and how far we've gained. And so it's not surprising we are seeing one of the hugest backlashes we have ever seen on the planet. And we have to remember that that backlash is based on our progress. It didn't come out of nowhere. It was those forces of patriarchy and those men mainly who were terrified that women were advancing on their particular rights and their particular power, and they didn't want to give that power up. And therefore, they were going to put women back under control. That said, I think that Trump and his cohorts ushered in a time in America. I have to admit, in my lifetime, I've never seen such an extreme pushback against human rights and women's rights in America. It's really terrifying. I think we are seeing the rise of Christian white nationalism in a way we've never seen it, and fascism. I don't want to be an alarmist, but I'm alarmed. I think that the Supreme Court is a delegitimate court. It's been hijacked by a fringe minority that was put in place by a president who was an illegitimate president, as far as I'm concerned. He was a perpetrator. He was a sexual, openly self-confessed perpetrator who put 3 people on the bench, one of which was a perpetrator. We had another perpetrator in Clarence Thomas. We have 5 people who are making our decisions, 3 of them put there by perpetrators and 2 of them actual perpetrators, determining what happens to women's bodies, which is utterly unacceptable and shocking. And I think they have a plan. In the last few months, they have eradicated the EPA, they have eradicated voting rights, they have eradicated, they're putting prayer back in school. We are seeing a rapid, immediate, kind of conflagration of the disembarking of rights. And I think, to be honest, we're seeing this everywhere in the world right now. India is on the verge of a rise. Hindu nationalism is rising there, and the hatred of Muslims and the destruction of Muslims is rampant and terrifying. My friends there say there could be another Rwanda situation. We look at Bolsonaro in Brazil. We look at Hungary. We look at Poland. We look at almost happening with Marine Le Pen in France. There is a cabal in the world, engineered by the likes of Steve Bannon, who keeps perpetuating this illness and this right-wing story around the world. But I also believe we're not going back in the bottle. This vagina is not going back in the bottle. Okay, that is not happening. Once your vagina is free and walking the streets and knows it is liberated, you're not putting it back anywhere. And the difference between our rights now is 50 years ago, we didn't have rights. We didn't experience freedom. We didn't know what freedom was. Once you have freedom, it's much more difficult for women or people to accept that. LGBTQI, same thing. Nobody's going back. So the question is, I just did a piece in The Guardian last week, and I was just saying, what are the forms of our revolt? What is revolt going to look like now in America, where they have 400 million guns, more guns than we have people in the country? How do we revolt against those guns? And I think part of what we all have to be imagining is, how do we resist this oncoming fascist trend, this oncoming Christian nationalist push that is rising everywhere in the world? And the way we do that, in my opinion, is through global solidarity, sisterhood and brotherhood, unity, and understanding that when we are fighting against climate catastrophe, fighting for workers' rights, fighting for against white supremacy, we are fighting for the same story, which is fighting against neoliberal, racist, fascist patriarchy. It's the same story. And that story is impacting the earth, it's impacting gay people, it's impacting trans people, it's impacting our body, it's impacting workers, it's impacting all of us. So how do we join forces? In America, things are very siloed, where you're just working in your little silo on your particular issue, but we can't do that anymore. We have to stand up for everybody's issue and understand, when I'm standing up to stop a dam, I'm standing up for women's rights. When I'm standing up for women's rights, I'm standing up for a dam. They are not separated issues. And I think we all have to be vigilant. We all have to be bold. We cannot go to sleep right now. We cannot say, oh, there's nothing we can do, because that will lead, there's a brilliant book by a writer named Robert Hafner. It's called, not Our Hitler, but Something Hitler, that he wrote. He was a journalist in Germany. And he said there were 3 reasons when Hitler came to power that he was allowed to take over. One was that people were very, very used to their comforts, and they didn't want to give them up. 2, they didn't really believe it was happening. And 3, the left was divided. So it feels like exactly where we are right now. And I think we all have to understand that those of us who are progressive, those of us who are radical, have always been leading the way, always. Whether the people who are more liberal are in the middle, take their time to catch up, we've always been pushing so that people come with us. And we have to respect progressives. We have to respect radicals. We have to listen to them, because they are outliners. They are not people who are joined in their comforts to the system. They are people willing to give up those comforts for real change. And I think we have to be in solidarity with those people who are bravely standing up and making radical change, and not put them down, and not say they're too much, and not say they're going too far, because if we do that, those right-wingers who are very extreme, who are very organized, who are very have strategies and all kinds of things that they plan, because all of them think with one mind, which is a very simple, unfortunate, dumb mind. They all think the same. They will eventually rise and take over. And I believe in the power of women, and I believe in the power of our brothers who support us, that if we do not join forces around the world and understand that in every country women are facing the exact same thing, and that our struggles are intertwined, our solidarity is our power, our global solidarity is our power. When Afghanistan became horribly abandoned last year, we didn't save the women of Afghanistan. But OBR managed to get women to rise in this country. 80, 90 countries rose up for the women of Afghanistan. And my sisters in Afghanistan told me they knew we couldn't stop the Taliban, but they know they're not alone. They know they're connected to women around the world, and that connection is giving them hope and keeping them going, because they know they're part of a world that sees them. That's a lot. That's a lot. And if that's all we can do for the women of Afghanistan right now, we have to keep doing that for the women of Afghanistan.
As you could see, Eve could be in any parliament, but they would most probably kick her out. And I'm not sure would, the politics always endure with such a brilliant political mind. So a side of art that we know is healing and transformative, it's also the words, powerful words. And as Eve spoke or read the piece of the apology, a little part of this, you could see how also empowering it is when you share words, and how whoever would read it, whoever passed through a similar thing, could find the courage and could find the strength to also start own healing process and doing own apology if needed. But maybe to finish with a little bit lighter thing, but connected to also a horrible thing. We talked about the war, we talked about the political situation all over the world. And of course, the need that we are much more in solidarity with each others. It's not anymore that we talk also about climate change, we talk about climate catastrophe, that it's waiting for us. As we can see, even in the region, the temperatures are rising, such a temperature so early in summer we never had, and like in Spain, they have 50 Celsius degrees that they didn't have for 70 years. You are writing something very unusual and should be very positive, and just tell us a little bit about the wild, because I think it also sums up everything what we talked. Just say something that we feel that when we are going, the change is really, the future is there with the youth.
Well, I think one of the reasons I love our movement so much, VDE and OBR, is it's a movement of art and activism, And it's 25 years this February that it's been here. And this movement really began in the Balkans, because when I came to the Center for Women War Victims and I saw what was happening to women here, I had seen an article of 5 Bosnian girls who had just been returned from a rape camp in Newsday, and I went, I have to go there. I just have to go there. I didn't even know why. And coming here really opened the door for me to create a movement with the play, The Vagina Monologues, that would end violence against women. And I think as we've worked in this movement, we've come to know that there's no way to end violence against women unless you end all the other violences. So if you're not working on climate catastrophe and you're not working on workers' rights and healthcare and childcare and whatever, you're not ending violence against women. Because if we look at what happened to nurses, for example, during COVID, who were the first people sent in on the front lines without protections, without gowns, without masks, right? Those women, so many of them died, so many of them got hurt. And of course, they were sacrificed, right? And so many women on so many frontline jobs got sacrificed, right? During that disaster, what I'm calling disaster patriarchy. For me, climate catastrophe has become a central issue, because the truth of the matter is we can't really fight for women's rights if we don't have a world. If we're overwhelmed with tsunamis and fires and droughts, how will we continue to fight for our rights? And I made a decision a few years ago that I was going to start working and directing my art towards climate change and catastrophe. And so I hooked up with this wonderful musician, a music writer who's a pop star and a pop writer in LA, and he's fantastic, and he just writes wonderful music for, all kinds of people like Gwen Stefani and big rock star, pop stars. And we started working on this musical called Wild, which is a wonderful fable about a farming village, and I won't go into the whole story, but it's really a story about people in this community's conflict between choosing something like fracking for money or listening to their children who believe that fracking will destroy their land. And with their children, something very magical happens to their children, and I don't want to tell you what it is, but the parents are forced to really choose between the lives of their children or money, which, to be honest with you, is the choice that we're all up against right now, right? The future of our children or money in the present tense. Like, how are we going to live differently so that our children have a future to live into, and what are we going to do specifically in the same way of the apology to change our lives and to live in America, for example, without constant growth, consumption, more and more and more. I mean, I have to tell you, I was in Africa, I was in Congo, and then I was in Kenya, and then I came to London, and I literally was, I couldn't speak, because in Africa, people are living on nothing, just nothing, like a banana a day, and are full of gratitude and are full of life. And I got to London, and it was just consumption, having, shopping, eating, taking more and more and more and more. And no one's happy. Everyone's just pushing, everyone's shoving, and people can't even see it, because in the West, we're so inside our consumer mentality. We just want more and more and more and more, and nothing satisfies us, because that's the basis of capitalism, isn't it? That you're just always being shown, look at Instagram, look how fabulous they are, look what they have, I want that, oh no, I want that, oh, they have that, I don't have that, I want that, I want that. And so we're constantly on this seductive wheel, more growth. We have to stop thinking about growth. Growth for what? Growing where? Where are we going? Where are we going? I sat in a restaurant the other night with Izvinjenje and all these beautiful women and Nenad, and I thought to myself, I am totally happy right now. I'm totally happy right now. We're eating food. We're in the deepest discussion about politics and life and art. I don't need anything more than this. What more do we need but our company and the beauty of the earth and good food together? We don't need more than that. And part of it is like, how do we shift our understanding that capitalism is constantly putting down our throat? I'm sorry I'm bringing up this book about oxycodone, but I'm right in the middle of it, and it's just like, one of the things I see about what the pharmaceutical companies did is they just made it so. They just told lies. They told lies. This is going to take your pain away. This is going to make you feel better. This is going to make you so that you can live your life in a completely different way. And they got people hooked on it. And then people needed more, and then people needed more, and then people started overdosing. That is the metaphor of capitalism, right? We just keep dropping it into people so people get more seduced and more seduced. And I just think, I ask myself this every single day. What is enough? What is enough? How do you know you have enough? How do you live in a way where you're grateful for every single thing you have? Because I think gratitude is so critical to a beautiful life. And I live in the country. I have the blessed life of living with trees and living with water and living with my pet turtle, my snapping turtle who comes every year, Lydia, and my dog. And I tell you, I get up every morning and I literally get down on my knees and I look at the earth, and I say, we are so privileged to be living on this earth. We are so privileged. We have to see it. We have to be grateful for it. Look at the city. It's so beautiful, Sarajevo. The whole region is such a beautiful region. Just to be grateful for it and to respect it and to honor it and to praise it and to cherish it. And I think, this musical, hopefully, it's very, the music is very, it's very inspiring and it's very wild, and the whole musical is very, it's very out there. It's very imaginative, and I'm hoping it's going to lift people's spirits, because I think what we need to do now more than anything is raise our vibration, because when the vibration is high, people get inspired and they can imagine, and we need every single person's ideas, imagination, vision, talents right now in order to turn this world around so that we all don't get thrown off the planet. So thank you.
And I think we could just eventually end with what Eve said. We have to inspire each other, and I hope that Eve inspired all of us, that we can be better people to each others and to the Mother Earth, unless we want that she would one day just shake us all off, you know, and say, okay, you don't deserve me. So I think we all deserve hear each other's and have the rest of the night wonderful, and just hug somebody, you know, when you return home, or do it here. And thank you once again for coming, and I think he will be sooner back to Sarajevo than, you know, like she has been 2013, it was not 1998 and then 2000 or whenever, but still I think thank you, Eve, once again, and thank you all for being such a wonderful audience.